I wanted to check out David Pakman talking to Cenk Uygur, confronting him over his soiree over to the right, his recent conference he did with Charlie Kirk with Turning Point USA, where they were coming together over some anger that they had towards the left. When I feel like he should have probably spent more time, going after maybe some of Turning Point's backers. And I think this is one of the few critiques that I know he's taken at least some interest in. But I mean, I also find like a lot of the allyship he's trying to find with the populist right now, as a matter of policy implementation in the next 2 to 4 years, extremely naive. The idea that maybe after 4 years, after Trump's failed to deliver, that maybe you could convince a few of those populist conservatives or a few of those people who might agree with some, who might be looking for another way to find solutions to their societal ills, that you might be able to convince them in 4 years if you offer a bold progressive package. Maybe, but you don't need to like be buddy with Charlie Kirk at Turning Point USA to do that in that manner. You can still go and talk to them on their podcast and go after their funders, but I don't think you need to be going to Turning Point USA conferences to do that. Anyway, I wanted to see David Pakman go head to head with him over it.
It's great to welcome back to the show Cenk Uygur, host of The Young Turks, author of the book Justice is Coming. Cenk, I'm so glad to have an opportunity to just have you on and to talk directly with you. Last time we had you on, you were on with Destiny, and we talked about some of the things we're going to talk about today, but I just want to talk to you directly. I want to first just kind of explain my understanding of the controversy that's surrounding you. And if I get anything wrong, you tell me. This all kind of started with some tweets involving Don Jr. and Elon Musk. We talked about it, where you expressed willingness to work with whoever if you can accomplish the things that you believe are worth accomplishing. We talked a little bit about whether it's realistic or naive to think these people will help us do that, but that was sort of like part one.
I'm sorry to start my bias right away, but I'm in the naive camp.
You appeared with Charlie Kirk at America Fest with Turning Point USA. We'll talk about the content of that, but you've also been criticized by some just for appearing there, like just that your presence there was the problem rather than your goals or being there. People are talking about a political 180 like Dave Rubin, which you've explained is not at all what this is. And then I've also seen in preparing for our talk today, some conversations you had with folks that I think you were previously well acquainted and friendly with that are seeming way less friendly right now for reasons we can talk about. And a lot of people that say they are on the left don't like what you're up to. Is that a fair assessment of kind of where we are right now?
Yeah, I mean, the devil's in the details, and that's why we're having this conversation. But as a summary of where people think it stands, yeah, I think that's relatively right.
Here's my view after, knowing you for, I think 16 or years or something like that at this point, reviewing the appearance, reviewing everything you've said. I don't think there's any problem with going on right-wing shows or appearing at America Fest in principle. I think we should try to talk to the other side. My goal would be try to poach their audiences, try to expose Trump's not really the populist he claims to be or whatever. I think there's no issue there whatsoever. If I were to just jump to my concern, it would be all the evidence to me points to these are obviously not good partners in the things we want to achieve. I'll give you an example. Of course, I want to cut military spending, Pentagon. You and I have talked about it. Why wouldn't we work with whoever wants to do that? At the same time, no matter what shows up on Twitter, it's hard to imagine that Pete Hegseth, Elise Stefanik, Huckabee, and Mike Waltz are ever going to be involved in actually doing that.
And put aside all of Trump's cabinet picks, Trump himself, you think Trump's going to say, you know what, actually, I approved a decrease in military spending. People could say in ads that I'm making America weaker, because that's what people will say. That's what you don't think Democrats will take the opportunity to try to run to be like, oh, Trump's making America weak. I could see that. If you think if he's given an opportunity to make a new, bigger aircraft carrier, he's going to say no? A new super weapon program, he's going to say no? You think that, with all of his chest beating on China, he's not going to want a big gun to back that up? He didn't, he increased the military spending while he was in office. He increased drone strikes while he was in office while decreasing the visibility on the drone strikes. I don't think that's the direction he wants to go, or that he's verbally indicated he wants to go in any way outside of just the vague, like, peacenickery, like, around Ukraine, which doesn't even look like it's going to flesh out to anything come January 20th. So, put aside Pete Hegseth, put aside Tulsi Gabbard, put aside Waltz or Marco Rubio, Trump himself. I just don't see it.
And so for me, it's more about how realistic is this thing? And is there a risk that your presence through no fault of your own is used simply to degrade the left with no real shot at improving anything? That's where I would place my concern, bearing in mind that I agree with a lot of what you're doing and what you're saying.
Yeah. So let me start by acknowledging that I get why people are concerned. Like when you see a pattern, and we've seen Dave Rubin do it and others, Tulsi Gabbard do it, et cetera.
Yep.
And you see what appears to be the first step there, that your mind goes to the second, the third, and the 18th step. And so, like, if you're on the left and you're just see us doing this peripherally, or you hear it on a different show and they showed you a 15-second clip or something, I get why you'd be concerned, right?
Yep.
Now, I've been as clear as anyone can possibly be that is not the path we're taking. And I kind of tore Dave Rubin's head off when Piers Morgan suggested that we make up. I've got no interest in that. And what's hilarious is people tune in to the Young Turks live at 6 o'clock Eastern every day, and they go, "Wait, I don't get it. Where's the right wing turn?" They're saying things that are like super progressive, populist, left wing. What the hell are these guys talking about, right? So I would ask you to not believe people with different incentives. What's really interesting, David, is that when I go on right-wing shows and other comments, tons of comments that I get is, wait a minute, I think right-wing media lied to me. That's right-wingers saying it. Because they say, I just saw like 15-second clip of you saying something outrageous or something that I totally disagree with that they view to be outrageous, right? But when I see you in a conversation, the left is not at all what I thought it was, right? Because the right-wing shows have historically have framed the left as the most extreme, that everyone on the left thinks that, fill in the blank, that we should release all the prisoners and not, do anything about crime, and whatever thing you could imagine that's the most extreme thing on the left. Almost all the right-wing previously believed that was the entirety of the left.
But the problem is if he goes up there and even if Cenk Uygur convinces them that on a lot of these issues where they view the left in this one way, he doesn't look like that, they'll just believe Cenk, while we disagree with you on gun control or XYZ, on these issues we agree with you, you're not like the establishment shills over there on the left, but that's because you're one of the good ones. That doesn't mean you're going to bring them over to the left. They're just going to say you're one of the good ones, and they're still going to disagree. Like, okay, you still lost them on abortion. Okay, you still lost them on gun control. You still lost them on a bunch of culture war issues, even if you have decided to either cede ground on them or decided that they're not worth fighting over in the grand scheme of things. These people are not going to necessarily, when all that's said and done, be like, okay, I'm going to move over to the left. They're just going to say, oh, you're one of the good ones, but that doesn't change what everything else is. Now, maybe in the long run, you can drag them over after 4 years of Trump. I can appeal to that being possible. Maybe they'll go check out your other content and they won't be as bad, and they'll improve. They'll go maybe in the right direction. I can agree that that's possible, but that has to come with you having a way to bring them over, hooking them well, having a good performance, and you need to pitch them the left alternative, and you don't need to put down the left in front of them. And I felt like something at the Turning Point USA conference, your job being there was kind of like partially to do that, to almost like put down the alternative. But even if all of this succeeds, under no circumstances are you going to get the we're going to lower the Pentagon spending. It is maybe in 4 years you can convince some of these people to give your side a try for a bit. But you also can't put down your side that much if you want them to give it a try, because you just convince them that, hey, Cenk Uygur's cool, and not, hey, the left is cool, then what have, to put it blunt and short, then you've achieved nothing but improved your ratings.
Everyone who voted for Biden, Kamala Harris, etc. So when they see us doing this, they're like, oh, wow. And that's ironically now the left-wing shows are doing the same thing as the right-wing shows did. Show 15-second clip and go, you see a slight disagreement there. Oh, that's it. He's a Nazi, he's fascist, etc. So I understand people who were misled by that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now when you get to the real things that you're talking about, David, so how did this start, and what am I seeing that others aren't seeing potentially?
Yeah.
So it started when I started running Yes Biden in the primary, just to try to knock him out. You remember, of course, that. And you know, at the time, you remember a lot of people said, oh, Cenk, you're crazy. Joe Biden is young and dynamic and the best Democrat to beat Trump. I mean, I had huge debates over that, including with Destiny and so many others, right? So we were 100% right about that. But what happened is I go on the right-wing shows you know, and by the way, can I just tell you, why did I go on right-wing shows to try to knock Biden out of a Democratic primary? Because mainstream media never pays attention to the left. But if you say something on a right-wing show, mainstream media goes, oh, that's so important. Oh, my God, I saw it on a right-wing show. It's so important, right? And I was able to bounce from there onto mainstream media, not me personally, but that idea. And it did help to knock Biden out, and that did help the Democratic Party. So if Kamala had run a better campaign, or if she just finished running a better campaign, we would have been able to beat Trump, et cetera. But so what I started seeing, though, when I went on there is, wait a minute, this right-wing base is not the same base that it was before. And David, by now I figured out why, okay? Because in the old days, they only watched Fox News, so you couldn't talk to them. They were Fox News talking point machines, right? I heard from Sean Hannity that corporate tax cuts help the middle class. No, they don't. What are you talking about, right? But now they're getting their news not from angels, but they're getting their news from dozens of different shows. And some of them are anti-war, some of them are still pro-war, some are this, some are that. And now what I'm seeing in the right wing is they've begun to open up their mind in a way that we are not familiar with. So when I go and tell the left wing, no, they're beginning to open their mind.
Their left wing third eye is open right now, after Trump was swept into office, really, and his cabinet is gonna be the same. It's gonna be the same stuff all over again. No, I don't believe. I can believe that in 2 to 4 years, after once again coming up short and having the excuse of the adults in the room stopping Trump from truly taking on the deep state has failed, and then you've got a decade of Trump failures, maybe you can take some of those people who have spent a decade of their life, half a decade of their, however many time, buying, maybe then they will have opened up their mind enough to consider moving or starting the process. But in the moment of victory, I just don't believe it. I just don't believe it. I mean, it'd be one thing to like quickly win somebody on the fence who's like, oh, I didn't know what a tariff was. God damn it, that is stupid. But that's not what you're meeting at a Turning Point USA conference.
They think of the past and they think, oh, hell no. This guy's got to be the biggest sucker on planet Earth and super naive. All the right-wingers I've known my whole life never have open minds. And they're this, that, and the other thing. Well, I'm here to tell you, you're seeing it wrong, okay? And so there's a lot of populists in those hills. But because they're right-wing populists doesn't mean they agree with us on everything. It doesn't mean that they are going to turn around and be like, oh, my God, you're right. We should have full trans rights. No, what that means is You know what else?
You know what else is in those hills? Some fucking dumb rednecks, okay? And there's also bigots, and there's also people who we will politely disagree with forever. There's tons and tons of different people of those hills. Some beautiful, some not so beautiful. And just because somebody's populist doesn't necessarily make it good. There's many types of good and bad populists. Just because somebody's willing to do something that's popular doesn't mean it's good. Vigilantism is popular. Some of the fringe stuff on the internet you see amongst the far right, they try to jump on popular themes to and be aggressive and edgy about it in order to get out. I mean, just because it's popular doesn't mean it's good. Just because it's populist doesn't mean it's good. I mean, maybe he has a different definition of populist than I have, but just because populist doesn't mean it's good.
Like populism, the where it intersects is anti-war, anti-corruption. And by the way, even on that stuff, guys, I get it. Yes, Trump is perfectly corrupt and they voted for him anyway. But by the way, so is Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. I know that breaks a lot of people's hearts.
Yeah, but don't say or don't pretend or don't go on shows or talk on social media that you're going to go with him and go on an anti-corruption crusade. Yeah, I'm going to go with Viktor Orban. I'm going to fight public sector corruption. I'm going to go with Al Capone to establish anti-mafia laws. I'm going to, I'm going to, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Burns is an immoral, morally corrupt, bankrupt man.
My goodness. YP Goldbug, thank you for the primer. I appreciate it. 16 months in the gutter. Truly incredible stuff here. Something over there.
But they've gorged on billions of dollars in corporate cash. Establishment Democrats and establishment Republicans invented corruption, right? And they bathed in corruption. So yeah, of course, Trump is also corrupt, but at least that base has an instinct of being anti-corruption. And so then when I go on the shows, I say, hey guys,
everyone has a base, an instinct of being anti-corrupt. Everyone does. Literally everyone has an anti-corruption base or idea of being anti-corruption, right? Trump is corrupt. We have many corrupt dealings we can openly point to. They choose to ignore them and to focus on the laptop and to focus on the magical adrenochrome drinking deep state pedophiles, to ignore the one that Donald Trump was trying to make the top law enforcement official in the country. At what point is it not actually caring about corruption and it's caring about your opponent's corruption so you can go after them, right? Like, for example, if you're like a hardcore populist and you support someone like Huey Long, for example, you're like, oh, I love Huey Long. He was great. You know, he got the kids textbooks and all this and all that. You kind of have to go with the corruption. You can't do that and be like, but I'm a staunch anti-corruption and, you know, I support Huey because no, he was corrupt. You're supporting him. You're accepting the corruption and you're saying, but I want to do these other things, so that's okay. It's not like Trump, his sons openly engaged in corruption, whether it was his son-in-law or his kids, whether it was at Trump Hotel, whether it was business dealings that Jared Kushner got with the Saudis after they left office. It's not like he had experience in the field that he was getting billions of dollars in. That doesn't come from nowhere. When the Crown Prince was personally getting involved to get him that money, like, so if you can ignore that, so you can, but then you're willing to engage in the satisfied hiss towards Hunter Biden and Burisma, that's not anti-corruption. That's just show politics. That's a display of the ability to play team sports.
For example, Elon Musk. Remember, he's a donor. He's Trump's largest donor. And they go, well, yeah, that's true. And remember how you should be wary of the donor class. And they're like, yeah, that's true. In the old days, David, they wouldn't have said that's true. They would have been like, no way, our donors are angels and they're the greatest thing on earth. And you're the only donor that's a problem is George Soros and the unions, right? So it's a different dynamic. Like, there's so many things that you ask. I know I'm taking a while, but I do want to address the other things, because the idea that you're helping them or legitimizing them is absurd.
Okay, there's sort of
like, if Stalin keeps talking about freedom, you don't say like, and like the base of Stalin talks about freedom. You'll be like, what do you mean? Is this a freedom? So just because he's saying freedom or saying these words doesn't mean any, like, you got to look at the actions. You got to look at the actions that are taking place. And if if the people who are supporting him willing to ignore all that other stuff where he is engaging in it, it doesn't feel principled to me. It does not feel principled. And if you're willing to ignore it in your own camp and willing to allow it to fester and you're willing to reward it, then it doesn't seem principled at all.
Like a three-part thing that I think will build to the most important aspect of what you just said. So first of all, I think you are doing an awesome job at correctly identifying something that's a major problem for the left and that explains a lot of the right's success, which is they aren't doing, at least right now, these toxic purity tests the way that some on the left do. You've identified the right. If you agree with them on 5% and you're kind of sick of the other options, they welcome you, even if you disagree on 95% of stuff. A lot of the opposite of that is happening on the left. I think that's spot on, and I think it's awesome that you've identified that. I do want to talk a little bit about the whole look at how they've changed. And one of the things that during your appearance with Charlie Kirk that got some attention and that you focused in on as well is, look, they're booing Mitch McConnell and they're booing Dick Cheney. That you wouldn't have seen that in the past. I'm skeptical about reading too much into that for the following reason. I don't think they have any real idea why they're booing or they're not booing. Or what I mean is the following. Trump and Charlie Kirk right now are benefiting from saying we're different from the establishment, we're different from McConnell and Cheney or whatever. If they do a 180 on that today, at next week's AmFest, Charlie Kirk just leads the crowd in a cheer of Mitch McConnell. We got him back, guys. I don't think there's anything real about that. I think it's just something that they've decided we're going to say to create a distinction, whether there is a difference or not. So I'm worried about reading too much into they booed McConnell, because next week they'll cheer him if someone says to Trump, now we cheer McConnell. You may agree, you may disagree. Let me then do the part three of...
Look, this would be the thing. If Mitch McConnell or Liz Cheney was stopping Trump from doing some like grand populist thing, for example, let's say the reason Liz Cheney was hated is because Liz Cheney stopped Trump from introducing maternity leave, like he promised to do on the 2016 campaign trail, and she stopped it because she's like, oh, that's not, that's, you can call that pro-family, but it's communist to me, and that's why she was hated. Then I'd be like, oh, that's a populist reason, and that's Trump being populist, and that is a display of Trump being populist versus the establishment, winning over the people. The reason that he doesn't like Liz Cheney is Liz Cheney looked at him trying to overthrow the government and was like, this is a bad idea, right? Now, overthrowing the government can be populist. It can also not be populist. At the end of the day, it's in favor of who has ever overthrowing the government, right? Which was the Proud Boys, a few other like thugs on the ground, and Trump watching it happen for 3 hours nervously while not telling them to stop until the very end, right? While his staff was calling people on the Hill, trying to convince them to send it back down to the House, which was majority Republican controlled, so they could continue the process so he could maybe stay president. Like, that's in favor of him, right?
Kind of where my mind is on this. I would argue that whether or not they cheer McConnell or whatever, even if we agree about...
Like, for me, it's like, the reason they're fighting, if it was, for example, we don't like Mitch McConnell because Mitch McConnell, stupidly was against this great healthcare reform, or the reason like Mitch McConnell challenged Trump on this great reform. That's never what I see. It's always power struggle, or it is them not wanting to clear the way for Trump, trying to tear down an institution of some sort. I don't see them jumping in the way of genuine economic populism of the style that Cenk is talking about. like if you just pick one side because of a power struggle, and they're power struggling against somebody that you don't like because they're part of an establishment that's been factionally against you, supporting the person in that instance, that power struggle isn't like, oh, look, we've united over this issue because we principally agree. Or no, you just don't like that guy. You just don't like that guy because he wants his power and you disagree with him ideologically. But Trump just wants his power. It's not that ideological. And they're institutionalists more than him. Which I think is the only real, I think it's really the biggest ideological disagreement. So, I mean, I just don't put any weight in that difference between him and Liz Cheney or Mitch McConnell.
About the problem, the risk of the populist rhetoric as a uniting force is that the solutions are different, even if we agree on the problem. So I'll give you an example. You, I, some of the people at AmFest, we're worried about the power of the establishment and elites, the recalcitrant centers of power that are corrupt, and we're sick of them and all of that. We would identify the problem with almost the exact same language that the crowd at AmFest would. The problem is when you say, okay, left-wing populist, what's your solution? We talk about social democracy, curbing corporate power, using regulations. They will still say the solution is tax cuts for the rich and corporations and all the same stuff. So my instinct is, and tell me if I'm wrong. I want to hear, I'm open to having my mind change. My thought is, even if we really were in agreement about the problem, once we get to solutions, we're not even at all on the same page.
And like the actually somewhat populist-ish solutions Trump does have, they're all awful. Like tariffs. The tariffs is not a solution. It is a popular solution when he floats it around with implementing tariffs and getting rid of the income tax. But now we're not only just talking about a populist bad solution, we're talking about an impossible populist bad solution. So when we actually get into something that you could say is at least populism, it's usually not even on areas that we would agree with. It is usually like stuff on immigration, stuff that a lot of times I would disagree with.
No, I think you are wrong. And it's very understandable because what you're describing is exactly what's happened throughout history, right?
Okay.
So that's the media and political ecosystem that we all grew up in. So again, that's why I understand people's concern. Like, whoa, wait, no way. All the Republicans I've known my whole life are immovable, right? And all they're ever going to do is corporate tax cuts and tax cuts for the rich. So here's where it's really important to do nuance and understand the new landscape.
Okay, tell me.
So first of all, on Mitch McConnell and Dick Cheney, no, they loathe them. You guys are wrong in thinking that it's a trick. I've now talked to hundreds, maybe thousands of MAGA guys. They're not, forget the hosts. When I talk to the individuals, the actual voters, the base, they have no incentive to lie. Have you ever met a MAGA guy?
Yeah. I don't think they're lying. I just think it's been several years of MAGA saying we don't like these guys, so they're on board. But if that changes, they'll just change their minds.
No, they won't. So let me explain why I think that they won't. Okay. So look, in the beginning, it starts.
Thank you for the 500 bits, November. One extra point is that MAGA and Cenk have totally different ideas as what the establishment looks like. Thanks for the awesome stream. Appreciate it. And true.
It's exactly as you're saying, David, which is Trump goes, I don't like Mitch McConnell for whatever crazy reason popped into his head at the time. Yep. And his wife is Coco Chow and weirdo racist things against Elaine Chao, right? Yep. Now that I like Elaine Chao, I think she's terrible establishment figure, but you don't need to go racist on it.
Yeah, so, the problem isn't that she's Asian.
Yeah, that's definitely not the problem, right? So I know where it started, and so you're not wrong about that. But now they genuinely hate the corruption and they could explain. So when I say like, oh, Mitch McConnell, when I get into the longer discussions, AmFest was really tiny, right? When you get into a 3-hour conversation on Patrick Bet-David or Tim Pool show or whatever, they all go, no. I know. He takes $1 billion from corporate donors and serves corporate donors. For the last 10, 20 years, as you know, definitely not 10, longer than 15, 20 years, David, as you know, my main thing is get money out of politics and the corruption, bring back democracy. And so whenever I talk to Democrats and I told them, well, Nancy Pelosi taking $1 billion is also corruption, they go, no way, she's an angel and you're a monster for saying that. And whenever I went to talk to the right wing, they'd say, yeah, Pelosi's terrible, but Mitch McConnell's an angel and you're a monster for saying he isn't.
Okay, but then ask about what the money Trump took. And it's going to be different. It's going to be, oh, no, well, that's different. Or, and in the worst cases, it's like, yes, it's corruption, but, you know, it is what it is. You know, the system is what it is. In a lot of cases, people, because Trump, in many instances, was the system accepting what it was. Not to necessarily say there shouldn't be any corruption whatsoever, but for him to say, like, look, I can play the game better than you.
Now, when I go to the right wing, they go, no, you're totally right. And it's not just because he's opposed to Trump. It's because of the money that he takes from this donor class. Okay. So, and Dick Cheney, they genuinely hate the wars. They don't want wars. And that I know that is so fundamentally different than the Republican Party we grew up with that loved wars, right? So now when you go to the Hegseths and the Stefaniks of the world, David,
Yep.
that's where you get into a really interesting dynamic. Now, in the beginning, Trump is not his base. Trump's not going to come out and go, oh my God, guys, I've seen the light, right? And I'm not going to serve Elon Musk or Miriam Adelson or Tim Mellon or any of these guys or the oil companies.
Really, I always wonder how deep they don't like wars thing is. They don't like wars until there is a big terrorist attack, or they don't like wars until, I would imagine, it touched a certain Republican pet issue. Now, that might be different when it comes to the base and when it comes to the party generally, but generally speaking, the party generally supports Israel. So I would say that in a situation where they might have to come to Israel's defense, it might be a little bit different. And I mean, that's not to be too surprising. I'm just saying, like to what extent, Cenk, because I don't think the party's going through an Israel transformation as much as he would like to think it is. Maybe it is more amongst the base on Ukraine, but not as much on Israel. There is some, but not as much as he thinks it is.
No, what's he doing? He's saying drill, baby, drill, because the oil companies gave him a ton of money. He gave domestic policy to Elon Musk and foreign policy to Miriam Adelson. So why does Stefanik and Hegseth and all those guys, they're hardcore. Mike Wall's a giant neocon.
Yes.
Why are they in the Trump administration? Because Trump's doing what every politician does, kissing the ass of his donors. And that's how he's going to start. And if his base doesn't challenge him, that's how he's going to end.
Did the base challenge him last time? Like, what evidence do we have this time they'll challenge him?
So that's what I'm getting to. So, David, you're right. In the first term...
Yeah, the Trumpers are going to come out and say, stop Israel, stop Israel. And we're going to... Sorry, man. Nah, I don't buy it.
That was a long time ago.
Yep.
The base didn't challenge him at all. Okay, if Trump said something, they parroted it and it was over, right?
Yep.
Now, when I go on those shows or I put on X, hey, you know that Rubio, Stefanik, Walls, and Huckabee are neocons, and they're going to try to drive you into war. Wall of thousands of comments. You're totally right. We're worried about it. We trust Trump. Let's see how it goes. But we got an eye out for it. Like, they're totally aware that they're neocons, and they don't like it. So Hegseth is a different animal because he's partly neocon and partly like meathead, and they like the aggro part of Hegseth and the military part.
Yep.
But they're not going to like the neocon part. And if I'm right about any of this,
yeah,
war is where it breaks, where the base then says to Trump, "No, brother, we told you anti-war. We didn't go tell you to."
It depends on the message he spins. I think that generally speaking, it is true. Population is really against the idea of a war kind of period right now, but I think it really does depend on the message he spins. Definitely if it is one on the American continent. For example, like an intervention in Mexico.
Help Israel invade Iran. No.
I'm not even sure about this. And I think this is really, I don't know that this is an ideological disagreement. I just don't know that we're on agreement on the facts. I'll give you a counterexample to what you're talking about. Yesterday, Trump does this crazy press conference at Mar-a-Lago. During this press conference, it was like 30 minutes long. He suggested taking Greenland and the Panama Canal with military force, taking Canada with economic force, and unleashing hell on Gaza, or allowing hell to be unleashed. That doesn't sound very anti-war. And when you look on the Truth Socials and everywhere else,
Jimmy Carter.
It's people defending it, memes about all of the Americas in an American
flag. And then, like, the Foreign Affairs Committee, like, releasing statements that's like just full up like an expanded version of Manifest Destiny. Just like we tamed the Wild West, being against big dreams is un-American.
Flag. They kind of seem to be just lining up behind whatever he says. I just am not seeing what you're seeing.
Yeah, David, that's exactly it. Because I dove in more, I'm seeing something that others aren't, and that's why I understand the skepticism.
But am I wrong about the reaction to yesterday's crazy
You're
tirade?
halfway wrong.
I'm
you're
halfway. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So I know I'm out on a limb here because believing that the right wing is going to turn on Trump on specific issues where they have disagreement when they've never done it before, I get that I'm taking a risk by saying that they're going to do that, right?
I question whether there is disagreement.
There is. So that's what I'm saying. So, and we're all going to find out with our own eyes and ears if I'm right or wrong, right? And you've seen me go out ahead of people before, right? Right, where I said in 2013, I said Bernie could beat Hillary Clinton 3 years before he had that historic run. I said Biden was too old and couldn't possibly win, etc. So now I'm saying, yeah, I see that disagreement. So, for example, on what you mentioned, just like I said, Trump in the beginning goes to serve his donors, and so he goes, "Oh yeah, Miriam, like the Palestinians aren't slaughtered enough. I'll slaughter them even more." Right? As long as you keep the money coming, right? And he engages in his fantasies about buying Greenland or invading in Panama, etc. So the first reaction that folks are going to have is we're defending Trump. And especially when the left attacks him, no, he doesn't mean invading Greenland. He means buying Greenland. He doesn't mean this, he means that. So will you get tons of that, 80% of that? Yes, right? And it's not quite 50-50. But do I see the 20% that is going, no, you're right. We didn't say invade any countries. We said anti-war. So that kernel...
20% has to fight against an 80% of the established... Good luck. 20% of the Republican Party has to fight against 80% of the Republican Party and Trump's wishes to go with his donors. Yeah, good luck.
Already exists and we're not even at day one. And when he actually, and what the number one thing they say is, guys, cut it out. He's obviously bluffing, right? And you're hurting his chance of bluffing when you say that he's definitely not going to do it, right? So, if he goes to invade Greenland, he will definitely lose half his base. That is mental, right? And they are actually anti-war. So, but that's not going to happen because he's not going to do that. He's bluffing, right? But look, this is where I think the rubber hits the road. And this is now I'm really out on a limb. Okay. I think his base is going to turn on Israel. And so when he goes,
dude, there's going to be a portion that is anti-interventionist in all sections that they're just super isolationist. So it'll maybe be 20%, at max maybe 30%, but it'll never get near 40, and it'll certainly never be a majority of the party, let alone 50%. I mean, it'll never be 50%, let alone a majority. It just won't. It just won't. Israel is a Republican big point. They love that. It's a big issue for them. It's a big issue for the donor class. It's a big issue for the established party. It's a big issue at the conferences. It's pushed a lot in the church. It's pushed a lot culturally over there. It's a huge issue for them. And it's tied into religion in such a way amongst the evangelicals, which is such a big part of the base, that it's not going to break, even though there'll be a certain amount of the base who is not part of that evangelicals, not part of that, who's isolationist in nature, who will always be against it. It'll never be more than, say, 30%. Never.
Goes, yeah, no, I'm going to give Israel another $30 billion, and I'm going to help them bomb more countries. At some point, MAGA's going to go, now that's enough, brother, man. That's enough. We said America first, not Israel first. And so I think they're going to turn on that. And that's the right wing's never turned on Israel. The left wing's never really turned on Israel. No one's allowed to turn on Israel in America. But when you tell the right wing you're not allowed to do something, okay, let's see what happens. So again, we'll see. I get that I'm predicting unprecedented things, but I'm doing that based on what I'm actually seeing on the ground.
Listen, my best assessment in having reviewed all of the evidence and in talking to you here is I think it's clear you're not doing a Dave Rubin. I think your heart's in the right place. I think retrospectively, here's my prediction. I'm not big on predictions. I think in a few years you'll say, I was a little naive with my expectations. And I could be wrong, you could be wrong, we don't know. I think if there's a fault here, we've seen, you're right, it's been a long time. And for 8, 9 years, almost 10 years now, since Trump came down the escalator and said Mexicans are rapists, the highest value has
starting point.
They ultimately do support whatever Trump wants. They don't really care about free speech or freedom or family values or money in politics. That's what we've seen for the last 9.5 years. I hear you saying it's going to change, but we are on the same page that it hasn't been that way, right? I think that part we do agree.
It's going to change going into year 9.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, look, I can list you dozens of examples where they say they're against cancel culture, and then they'll say, "Well, we should cancel them," right?
Year 9.
Like, I mean, look, but to be fair, the Democrats did the same thing. We're against cancel culture, but if you criticize Israel on a college campus, we're going to arrest you and take away your diploma. That sounds like cancel culture to me, right? So, I mean, but I can give you dozens of other examples. Oh, you're protesting.
Yeah, but I mean, like, that's an issue I think that's never been. I think that's because when people hear that, I don't think if you put that in front of 9 out of 10 people, they'd be like, that's horrible, it's terrible. I think that was always the case, though. I think that was always the case. They'd always be against it for First Amendment reasons. But I think people have been willing to overlook it. Just like, for example, Trump, apparently First Amendment hero, wanting to ban flag burning, which is actually quite popular over there in the Republican base, and actively goes after the press, sues pollsters who gives them bad numbers, wants to open up the libel laws. Not exactly the best friend of the press or the First Amendment.
Oil companies, pipelines. We're going to pass.
But the right are the warriors of free speech.
A law in Florida that says we could run you over in our cars, right? I mean, it doesn't get any more cancel culture than murdering someone with your cars because they protested an oil company, right? So, and freedom of speech, they take away freedom of speech all the time. So I totally agree that the last 9.5 years, they have not shown what I am seeing that they're going to do in the future. And I totally agree with you, David, that we're going to come back 2-3 years from now and see how this went and see, hey, was I right that there was this, that their composition had changed and they were more open to a rebellion against Trump and actually had a mind of their own as opposed to being in a cult for Trump. And I get if you're on the left that you're like, no way, they're in a cult, etc. But guys, remember, we all live in bubbles. The Trump people have been in a massive bubble for a long, long time, right?
Yes.
But we've also been in a bubble. And our bubble says, if you disagree with any of us 5%, we kick you out of that bubble and we call you a racist and a fascist and every word in the dictionary. And then we go, oh my God, how did we lose the popular vote? Well, you lost the popular vote because you pushed everyone out.
Yep.
I mean, maybe you're talking about that some level, like culturally in like the podcast world, but I mean, the Democratic Party has always been a big tent party of kind of like opening it up to everyone and like allowing like us to like add faction after faction after faction, in order to then build a big enough tent to beat the Republicans. Like I mean, maybe this is like just a commentary about like what it was like culturally in left media spaces or being accepted in like popular liberal culture, but within the party itself, within the party apparatus, I don't know.
Okay, and
no denying that. I'm with you 110% on that. That's for sure.
Yeah, and MAGA, when they hear me say things that they didn't even, you know that MAGA doesn't realize we're anti-corruption, the left is anti-corruption. They don't even realize the left is anti-war because Kamala Harris was like, Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney are my best friends. I'm going to go on a college campus tour with them, right? So the establishment is pro-war, and the Democratic Party, unfortunately, has become more establishment, right? So they look at it and they're super surprised that the left thinks is anti-war, anti-corruption, and all these things, right? When I talk to them about paid family leave, Patrick Bet-David polled his audience. 75% of his audience said yes, paid family leave. 12 weeks off for moms after they have a baby. That's arguably a conservative principle. I think it's a giant progressive principle. We know it's a giant progressive.
But this isn't going to change. It's been like, when you pulled these issues, it's always been like this. It's been like this for the last 20 years. This isn't approve a giant sea change.
Principle.
Yep.
But that's where the unity can come. But you can't pass any of these things or even have hope of passing any of these things if you tell the people who are in charge, who won the popular vote, we're going to hate all of you. We're never going to work with you. We're never even going to talk to you. So we have no hope of ever winning those votes back, because you can't win them back if you're not talking to them, right? So but we don't live in a bubble. No, we also live in a bubble, and our bubble needs to be burst, because unfortunately, some portion of the left has stopped being open-minded. And what I say on Young Turks all the time is our community is open-minded and open-hearted, right? We're trying to do the right thing, and we're trying to get there no matter what. And what I would ask all of you is eyes on the prize. The prize is policy. If you pass policy, you improve actual people's lives. If you don't, all of us in media and politics are just playing ego games. Who's bigger? Who's this? Who's more pure? Who's the one that represents blah, 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 blah. That's all about ego. But actually getting policy passed affects your life. And you're not going to get policy passed going into your little bubble and calling everyone outside the bubble a fascist.
We know that won't work, that's for sure. Listen, Cenk, I appreciate you being...
You're also not going to get policy passed by grabbing 20 to 30% of the Republican Party who might agree with the populist idea that the donor class will never, ever, 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 ever allow, and Trump's not going to pick up. Like, it's about fighting over people that you might be able to win back over 4 years later, but certainly not immediate policy implementation. My goodness.